Hello, all, and welcome to another Sanctuary Sunday. Sanctuary! Yes, the day where I cover something other than war games. And today, I have a very special topic. This is baseball. Yes, I'm going to cover baseball games, and there's quite a few games I need to cover or talk about, and my history with baseball, so bear with me. This one might be a little bit longer than normal, but hopefully worth it, especially if you're interested in baseball. Now, baseball has always held a special place for me. It was my first love as far as sports go. I just loved the history. I loved following the old teams and the old players and the famous players and the infamous players as well, and seeing how the sport developed. And for the longest part of its history, baseball, it was that unique sport that was relatively the same, from the 1920s up to modern day, pre 1920 and especially pre 1900. Different rules, different conditions, gloves, bats, balls, all that stuff was a lot different. In fact, strikes were and balls were called differently. But the neat thing about the sport is uh, it was generally the same. So there was this notion that you can kind of compare it, and there was a continuity of throughout the ages, that you could compare somebody in the 1940s with somebody in the 1980s. There's steroids and free agency and new training and juice balls and all that other stuff have kind of changed the sport, but maybe not as dramatically as football in the 1940s versus football in the 1980s, or even basketball in some respects with the 3-point line and all that other stuff. But I digress. We're here about baseball, and what I have on the table there, that's my dad's minor league baseball glove. My dad played minor league baseball. My brother played, organized baseball and high school baseball, and I played sandlot baseball. In fact, that's how I messed up my knee, and then permanently injured it when playing organized football. I played football in high school. So, but baseball had always had a passion for me. The history and the baseball cards. I collected baseball cards. My brother, who's 7 years older than me, he collected baseball cards, and that's how I got a lot of my I got his doubles because I would sort his cards and sleeve his cards when he was in high school. So always loved baseball. And in fact, it permeated into my gaming. My first game that I ever developed, my first two games that I ever developed were baseball games. And I developed them to play with my brother, and my brother and I developed the second design. I did the first, and he and I worked together or collaborated on the second design, and just loved playing baseball and wanted to recreate baseball and wanted to recreate the history of baseball. So in that regard, and loved watching baseball too. In fact, this ball here is the only ball that I caught at a game. Caught this at a Royals game. Tom Gordon was pitching, Flash Gordon, and I actually got my hands on two balls. I caught this one, and then an inning later, or a couple innings later, I got my hands on another one. It bounced out of my hands, and people around me were like yelling at me because it's like, you already have a ball. I didn't know there was a limit on one ball in a game. But anyway, only ball I ever caught at a professional baseball game. But so with gaming in baseball, I kind of classify baseball games in two large categories. There are simulation games, which is you're really trying to recreate a historical season, a historical outcome, a statistical outcome. And so there's a whole variety of games that are trying to recreate the statistical aspect of baseball. And then there's the second category, which has a lot of stuff in it, but that's basically just abstract baseball. You're just trying to have a game that recreates baseball in general. They're not tying it to a specific season or a specific player or a specific event. Now those vary in detail. Some are very simple. and basically, it's the baseball theme is pasted on, and then others are, can be a little bit more involved and come close to being a simulation, but they're really not trying to create a historical simulation. So, my first game I developed in baseball was basically the abstract version. It was a poster I got out of, I think, of a electric company magazine that was a baseball diamond, and I wrote numbers on it from 11 to 66, where you roll 2 dice, and you had different outcomes. So 66 was a home run, and 11 and 66 I think were home runs, and everything else in between were strikeouts and walks and singles and doubles and the like, and outs. So, but my second game, the one I developed with my brother, was more statistical. We kind of went and rated players and tried to rate their hitting and their power and their pitching and fielding, and we kind of tried to create our own statistical game. Then I found a game that was much, much better than that, and that was Stratomatic Baseball. Now, Stratomatic Baseball, this one right here is the Stratomatic Express. This came out years later. Sad tale about my Stratomatic Baseball is I had a lot of Stratomatic Baseball stuff. I mean, a veritable ton of Stratomatic Baseball cards. And Stratomatic Baseball is very much a sim heavy. They would take the stats of a season, and they would crunch it through their numbers or their computer, and they would produce a card that gave you a statistical reading of that player for that year. Now, this one right, there was a basic game, which I've really played a lot of, and then there was an advanced game. These cards right here are more of the basic game. The advanced game would be on the back side, and it just had a lot, and hence its name, it had a lot more detail. It had, a lot more charts you had to go to for fielding, and a lot of different outcomes. But this is basically the basic game here. You'll have a pitching card. You roll 3 dice. You roll 3 6-sided dice, preferably one of a different color. And the 1 6-sided dice is 1 to 6, of course, and that's going to tell you which card you're going to be on. So if it's 1 to 3, it's on the batter card. If it's on 4 to 6, it's on the pitcher card. And then the second 2 dice, you read those together. So they'll do a result of 2 to 12, and then you just read the outcome here. So if I rolled a 1 6, a 1, and then 2 3s, a 6, that'd be a strikeout. If I rolled a 4 to 5 and then another number, it'd be on the pitcher's card. And these cards were created through statistical outcomes, right? They would look at the stats of that season, and they had their own formulas to create these cards. And the advanced game, it had the same result of 1 to 3 and 4 to 6, but there was a lot more detail and exceptions and charts you had to go to. It tried to get a little bit more chrome on it, a little bit more statistical reality, or whatever you want to call that, and play closer to the actual, to have play recreate the actual stats of that season, or play to those actual stats of that season. So I had a ton of this stuff. I still have some of it left. I still have quite a few of it left, but in moving, I had left my games at my old house, and as the last thing to move, because I wanted to put all my shelves up first. And as fate would have it, I had a pipe burst, and a lot of my games, and especially my Stratomatic stuff, which was closer to the floor, got destroyed. Now, I still have some of those cards that are, even to this day, drying out. They got kind of warped. I could probably go through and put them in books and try to flatten them out and what have you, but they're all fluffy. A lot of my Stratomatic stuff, probably about 60 or plus % of it got fluffy. But I had seasons going back to the 20s and 30s, and complete seasons from like 80, 85 forward. So anyway, kind of hurts to talk about that, but Stratomatic was my first love in that regard, and I always go back to it. And it's my favorite sports game, because just the way, especially on the basic game, it just, you could play the baseball game and have some feel that you're doing some kind of statistical recreation, that player is going to perform pretty close to what they did that season. and played in a whole game and compare the players. And you can play players from, and back to what I was saying before about comparing, you could play like the 1927 Yankees versus, the 1998 Yankees, and see how they play out. And so that was kind of, I really liked that about Stratomatic Baseball. And there are other heavy sim games. Another one that I got a little bit into was Dynasty League Baseball. This one I didn't even, I think I got this at a sale, at a library sale. But as you can see here, a lot more numbers on this one. There's a lot more, statistics and trying to recreate the statistical simulation of that season. But there's a lot more detail, as you can see on these cards, that and you would get a whole deck of these, and you would have to, these were perfed, and you would perf these out, punch these out. Some of the earlier Stratomatic were perfed as well. Actually, most of the Stratomatic cards are perfed. So you'd punch these out and you have the complete season. So you'd have all the players, and then you could play with the lineups you had, or you can recreate, kind of fantasy teams if you wanted to do that. And so yeah, here's one. This one I didn't punch out this one either. I think I punched out the one season I had. This one was black and white, and then they went to color. But you can see a lot of different numbers and what have you on there. So this one is probably more realistic, whatever that means. I mean, this dives into the numbers a little bit closer. I haven't compared this versus the advanced game of Stratomatic. I mostly played the basic game of Stratomatic because I was playing over a lot of different seasons, and some of the earlier cards didn't have all the advanced stats. But this is the heavy side of simulation baseball. I also, when I was lived in Lawrence for several years, and there was a group of professors in Lawrence at the University of Kansas that developed a game called Ballpark Baseball. And actually in that group was Bill James of was it sabermetrics or whatever the statistical theories that he came up with on baseball that a lot of teams started using. Actually, he worked for the Red Sox for a while. But Bill James was in that league and with these law professors, but then they developed this game called Ballpark Baseball. Now, I just made copies of stuff because it wasn't a mass-produced game, and I just kind of bought into the league. Excuse me. And I made copies of of the cards for the season, and we started out. I think my team. I think I took it over in like 47 or 48. This was my 49 attempt, which I actually made it to the World Series, but lost. But hence the name Ballpark. It was really based on the stadiums, and I had Briggs Stadium, and so you had a lot of different charts that were based on the stadiums in here, and so that was kind of something that was key to the game. Is everything emanated from the stadium. And I mean, you still have the player cards that are these look somewhat similar to what you would see in Stratomatic or Dynasty, although a little bit more simple, but it was all based on the stadiums. And so I played that for several years in that league in Lawrence, Kansas. Also picked up this was a print and play. I don't know if they actually ever published it, but it was Dice Baseball. I got this off BGG, and it was hence this name. Very true to its name, it's Dice Baseball. But there was a lot of different cards that you had here, and it was again based on the season, and you would it was all based on dice. This one looked like in between Stratomatic Baseball and Dynasty League Baseball as far as where it kind of fell in my complexity level. But played a little bit of that over time as well. Also, during this time period, or actually early, during my Stratomatic days, I picked up a game called Pennant Race. Now, this was very ambitious in that this was a way to sim an entire season with just rolling a few dice. This was the 82 season. You had these dice here that you roll. As you can see, that this is the game. There's rules to it, but you had this roster book, and then you're going to roll dice. And then you compare the dice to the season, to the teams that are playing, and you had your batting, endurance, rotation, park, minors, right-hander versus left-hander, weather zone, and then they had these ratings of batting, power, speed, and fielding, and then you add those numbers up, you roll the dice, and voila, you could sim a whole season. It would give you an outcome, whether it was, how many runs each side scored in the game. And so this was interesting, and I picked up a lot of all-star replays because I'm apt to do that. There's a few charts in here as well, but I picked up a lot of all-star replays. Like here's your power chart, because you'd add up the totals of your starting team and then roll the dice, and then it tells you how to read the results. But in the All-Star replays, they had other teams. They had other of these roster books that you could use. And then there was also, in one of the All-Star replays, which I really love, is you could recreate seasons. You can go out. It tells you how they made these roster books, right? It was the secret sauce. And I went and I picked up a pre-1900 baseball encyclopedias. I collect a lot of baseball encyclopedias. Have a lot over, now that you have Baseball Reference, why do I have all those books? But anyway, so I went in and created I don't know if it was like 1888, 1890, or I did one season. I created a season. I did a playbook for each of the teams that season. And so I could play, pre-1900 baseball. But so this was an interesting game of, recreating an entire season with just a few rolls. And then, that's my statistical games, that I played over time. Again, played a ton of Stratomatic, probably played Stratomatic more than anything else as far as any of these games are concerned. But that was, and there are a lot of other, there's, APBA baseball, and there was Status Pro Baseball and all that. There was a lot of different baseball games out there, but these were my, Stratomatic was my go-to. And if I wanted to do a whole season, I would play around with Pennant Race. And then I got a little bit into Dynasty and played quite a bit of Ballpark in that league. So that's really my statistical simulation or simulation baseball games. Then I started getting into some of the more abstract stuff. And, the reason why this doesn't fall into simulation is that you make up your own team. There's not a set of players that you're trying to simulate from a season. Now you could go in and apply the factors from Monday Morning Manager and try to recreate a team, but then you're doing the ratings yourself. And for some reason, I kind of defer to someone that's either got a program or has done some work on it than me just making my ratings. Because this goes back to the second game that I developed. That I was kind of making. My brother and I were making our ratings ourselves. You could do this with Monday Morning Manager, but this is really more abstract. And this was really kind of just a basic baseball game. This is really trying to recreate baseball and all its detail, but it doesn't have the benefit of having actual players involved here. And so, but I played this quite a bit as well until I was playing this in college until I found Earl Weaver baseball on the computer. And then this kind of went more to the side, and I played quite a bit of Earl Weaver baseball on the computer back in the day. I think that probably dates me. And then, of course, get into Sega and PlayStations and all that other stuff. But this is a kind of really comes really close to a sim, but not quite. It kind of stops short because it is, I kind of call this quasi simulation, right? So you have simulation, you have abstract, and then you have this hybrid in between where this kind of comes close to a simulation, but doesn't go all the way because it doesn't have the actual players. And on the flip side of that are quasi-sims that are trying to produce the player stats, but the gameplay is a little bit more abstract. So this is, quality gameplay, simulation gameplay, but don't have the players. And then let's get into some of the quasi simulation that are, have the players, but don't really have the gameplay. And one of those is Tops Attacks. And when I covered my baseball a while back, basketball, when I covered basketball, Tops Attacks was a big part of that. And this is, and I think I did that for football as well. This is kind of Tops Trumps type game. It's a game where you're basically just comparing numbers, and whoever has the highest kind of wins that result. There are more advanced rules to some of these, but this game basically had 3 ratings. You had, fastball, changeup, and what does that say right there? Specialty. And you'd have that for all these different players. And this had some historical cards in it as well. There's Cy Young, there's Babe Ruth, and there's Jackie Robinson. And they were kind of foil cards that were for the legendary people. But your regular, you could have a whole group of players based on their team. So you can kind of play a team play, but they didn't have the full team, and it was collectible, right? So you had to buy numerous packs to get players, and you can't buy just a complete season or a complete team, which is, Stratomatic and Dynasty were really good at that. So this one, it has the effect of, you have some simulation value of, you have actual player ratings, question how far that goes, and the gameplay is very abstract. So this had much more realism of baseball and all the things that go into baseball in the game of baseball. This one has a veneer of player stats, but not really a simulation. In that same vein is MLB Showdown. Now this one came a little bit closer than Topps Attacks. Topps Attacks was very, very abstract. But this game, you actually had a 20-sided die that you rolled, and you had these characters. You had these players based on their ratings. Like here's Montgomery, who's a closer, right-handed pitcher. He's got a 1 innings pitch because he's a relief pitcher. You had a point value to build out your team. This was kind of a fielding rating. But then you had this 20-sided die here, or results based on a 20-sided dice based on how they did in the season. Now, it's not as detailed as Ballpark or Stratomatic or Dynasty. Clearly not as detailed as Dynasty League, but there was some relation between how they performed and what your results were. And the gameplay was a little bit more detailed, definitely more detailed than Topps Attacks, but not really that detailed. This is a reference card for that, telling you how to basically, kind of play the game there. But so this is quasi. You're getting some feel of the players, and again, this was collectible, so they're trying to cash in on that whole trope. I mean, baseball cards and collectible card games kind of go hand in hand, right? Because a lot of us collected baseball cards, and so collecting baseball cards for a game makes sense, right? But this one really had the gameplay, the connection to the actual realism was very low. Then we have another hybrid that tried to show, and I got it here in my little plastic bin here. But you had Hero Click. So this was a kind of combination of clicks, Hero Clicks. The fighting game, which had a lot of superheroes and the like, and there was, I think, Mage Knight or something like that. But this was for baseball. So they used the click base for baseball so that you could. Some of these, I bought a older set, and some of these are kind of worn down a little bit. They kind of faded, but but you could, the clicks would tell how they would be advancing in the game, and then you had your results based on what how they did in the game, or how the statistics or the clicks were based on their stats, right? And so there was a whole game here using the click base to progress them through a game on how they were doing, and it had their ratings and fielding, and there's some places of where they hit and stuff like that, but basically it was you bought it because you liked the mini, you wanted to collect the players that you liked, and you had a little mini there of your player. And so this was an interesting game. It didn't last very long. MLB Showdown didn't last very long. Topps Attacks didn't last very long. This one might have had some staying power because there was an actual game in there. I mean, the way you place your players in their different positions, you could do a little bit of a shift. I mean, you could feel a little bit like a manager in this game and maneuvering the players and not just setting a lineup. And you kind of have the look of the field like you're watching a game, seeing the minis on the field. But again, this was collectible. So that limited its ability to really recreate a whole season or teams. And the gameplay was, it's okay, but it was based on a click, so it wasn't based on statistics as close as I would have hoped. So those are your quasi statistical or quasi simulation baseball games. So now let's get into some games that are are basically abstract. Now, some of these games do baseball better than others. You have Baseball Highlights 2045. This is actually could be considered a statistical simulation game, but you're using robots, right? This is taking baseball to the year 2045. So you have human players mixed with robots and the like. And so it's got a real interesting gameplay. This plays solitaire very well. It plays very quickly. And you can play a group of players and kind of do a whole season or a tournament really quickly with this. So it's a really interesting game and design that is based on baseball, right? I mean, this is it's not as detailed or as close to baseball as Monday Morning Manager, but it's got a lot more tropes of baseball than MLB Showdown, Tops Attacks, and games like that. But it's kind of sci-fi, right? You've got robots in here, but very, very playable game and does solitaire very well. Then you have Bottom of the Ninth, which is, again, you're recreating baseball. Again, there's no statistical connection here. You're not having an actual season or actual players. But the neat thing about this one is you have pull out a player here. You have a baseball card, right? You've got an old baseball card back to the collectible, and this wasn't collectible. You can buy all the cards together, but you have a baseball card, and then it had its abilities on the back. And true to its name, you're basically just doing the bottom of the ninth, right? You're just trying to get 3 outs. And so this whole game is based on how you as the pitcher are making decisions on what you want to do and what your strengths are versus the lineup, that's been set for that 9th inning. And your job is to get them out, and their job is to get a run, to win the game. And so it's all set on a very honed in, kind of looking at it under the microscope. You're just looking at the 9th inning, and what are the decisions that the pitcher the manager and the pitcher for the defense have to make, and what decisions do you have for the lineup to try to get the winning run. And so it's again closer to the actual aspects of baseball, but on a very, very small scale. But it's all made up, characters and the like. But it's a very interesting game. It's very, very quick to play. I mean, you're playing the bottom of the ninth, right? And they have quite a few cards. I mean, this was the base game that came out, and then they came out with this clubhouse basically it's a box to hold all the cards, and I just made the playing pieces in here. And actually, some of the markers are like sticks of gum, because we used to get sticks of gums in baseball packs, and so some of the I don't know if I have them in here, but some of this, yeah, here they are. So some of the you have a stick of gum. That's basically some of your charts there. That's your player at bat, balls and strikes. So and good components, good quality components in here. But this is a fun game, but it's not statistical. It's not a simulation. It's a game. You're playing the bottom of the ninth and pitching and hitting and trying to get a run, and that's what that game is. So those are the abstract versions that at least try to recreate some aspect of baseball. Then you have ones that are just pure, abstract. So you have stuff like the baseball card game. And I'm not showing all my baseball games, but these are just ones that I think are examples of what I was trying to display. But you have the baseball card game. But this is basically just a card game, and it's just home run, double, stolen base, strikeout. So it's based on card play, what's going to happen in the game. So you're playing baseball, but there's no connection to reality. There's no connection to statistics or real players or the like. It's just a very abstract game, and there's a lot of games that do that. And then my most basic of my baseball games is sports dice. Baseball, you're just rolling these dice, and these dice have stuff like hit or caught or foul or strike, and so it's super abstract and super basic. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And as baseball season starts, it's the spring is in the air. Fly balls are in the air. Some balls are flying out of the park. That's baseball. And this is kind of my history of gaming baseball, or at least a piece of it over time. Your mileage may vary, your experience might vary, but I'd love to hear your experience with baseball and baseball games. Feel free to put them in the comments. Love to hear them. sorry for taking so long on this one, but this was a topic very near and dear to my heart. Something that I've, my brother and my father, something that kind of ties us together as we were growing up. My son played baseball until we moved, and we moved to a school that didn't have baseball. And he and I both have had thoughts and regrets on whether he should have continued, if I should have tried to find a travel team or something for him. But he loved playing baseball as well. Um, he just took off and run whenever he hit the ball, so it was kind of crazy. Anyway, that's what I have for you today. My trip down baseball on Sanctuary Sunday. Thank you so much for stopping by. And the best way I know you stopped by is drop a comment. Let me know what you think about any of this. Just keep it civil and have a great day. Thanks for watching.